The greatest power you possess is your ability to choose. Join Lowe's Moore as he reveals how you can begin to maximize that power by exploring yourself on the deepest levels and committing to making lasting and positive changes. Get ready to achieve breakthroughs that will lead to accelerated growth and transformation, because you are now tuned in to The Blueprint.
Why they actions contradict the lamb. I'm fellowshipping when I'm with the fam. That's more relations. That's forming a fun.
Good evening, and welcome to Lowe's Moore and The Blueprint. I'm excited, really excited to be back with you guys. I want to say right off the bat, again, thank you for all your support, all your comments about the Blueprint podcast, and again, I had my pebble. I was looking for my pebble, and I found it. So I'm going to drop my pebble, right? Because Denzel Washington said my life was like a pebble, right? And when you drop it in the pond, you get a ripple effect, and you never know how many people you have impacted with your life. And so I'm going to drop this pebble because I'm expecting that each and every show is going to give a ripple effect. Somebody's going to be blessed tonight, right? And somebody's going to be blessed down the road by something that my guest has said, or that something that was mentioned on the call, not on the call, but on the show tonight. And we hope that everybody would be blessed this evening. And I'm really excited. Hopefully you guys are enjoying your Labor Day. I know up in here in New York, we're still trying to recover from the storm, last week, and so, but yet yesterday was beautiful, and today we had a family cookout. I love this time of the year because even though the summer's ending, right, it ends on the note of family, and no greater place to be than be with your family. And so we cooked out yesterday, and what we didn't eat yesterday, we were over my sister's house and hanging out there. Even though it was raining, she could put up a big tent and stuff like that, and we were just hanging out there. And man, I was kind of sorry I had to go, but it was time to do the show. So I hope you guys, now tomorrow's Labor Day. That's the real holiday, is tomorrow. But we've learned to cook out and do things and Saturday and Sunday so we can just chill out, sit back and relax on Labor Day, which is, man, one of the greatest. Whoever came up with that idea, that was just a great idea, because usually you do all your cooking on Monday and then you got to go to work on Tuesday, and then you tired, like you need a vacation from the vacation, but or the holiday. So, and you guys remember maybe back in April, I had invited a number of pastors on, and I had asked them the questions about, is there more? And we talked about there is more, and I spoke to a number of different pastors. We're going to address that subject tonight again. We're going to reconnect with that, and we're going to have a good time. My guest is awesome. I'm looking forward to this. So I'm going to move forward, right? I want to say again, thank you for your support of the Blueprint podcast. Man, I love you guys, and be blessed. And remember, this is interactive. So if you got a question or a comment, you can just pop it on, and we're answered as we go along. So I'm going to start with the book of the week. And as you can see, I don't know if it's to your left or my right, whichever one it is, you could see it. It's called There Is More, right? I call him Dr. Randy Clark, but Randy, he is a doctor, but Randy Clark. And this is a book that we dealt with in April, and we'll do a little bit of that today. So this is a book you ought to get. This is a must read, and get this, man. And I promise you that you will enjoy it. And let me say this before I move on from this book, because back about 6 or 7 years ago, man, of course I was doing my thing, going to church, meeting all the needs of the church, trying to minister outside the church and so forth and so on. And it just didn't seem like things were getting better. And it didn't seem like I was having any kind of impact. Right. And so I had asked God a question, and I said, Lord, is there more? And that was a Sunday. Monday morning, I get a call from a old friend of mine, Pastor Paul Sherrill. And he said, the Lord told me to give you a call and come to take you and your lovely wife out to lunch. And he did. He came and he took us out to lunch, and he talked about how he had experienced God in such a powerful way by going around the country, around the world, and seeing God manifest his presence, seeing God do signs, wonders, and miracle. And we, for about 2 years, we just continued to talk. And then he invited my wife and I down to a school of healing, right, that he hosted. And the main person is my guest tonight. And that experience has changed me. In last 6 or 7 years, I've been totally a different person, and my experience with God has just been so awesome. So that's the book of the week. There is more. And then the word of the week is character. Yeah, I love that. That's one of my favorite words of all time, right? No matter what you do or where you go, how important it is to have character, right? Nobody's going to hire you or put you on their basketball team or make you a part of their team, whichever that team is, business or in the church, if you don't have any character. So that's a very powerful, powerful word. And that's our word of the week, character. And then the affirmation, the Hill and Pierce Harper affirmation this week from one of my favorite coaches of all time, John Wooden. He said, be concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. And that's John Wooden. Of course, he had a lot of affirmations, and he had a lot of quotes that are very, very powerful. So make sure your character is in order. And then we have the music and movie of the week. Both of them, the music is from New Boys, from God's Not Dead, and the movie is from God's Not Dead. And the music is great. The movie was great. And so if you're looking for a good movie or you're looking for some good music, get New Boys, God's Not Dead, and I'm sure they have plenty of things since then. And this movie is just awesome. Watch 1 and watch 2. And I think there's another movie that was done too called Do You Believe? And then finally, I want to now, because we want to get right into this, right? And so I want to show you a little highlight of my guest for this evening before I introduce him.
I bless you in the name of Jesus. Impart and activate gifts of the Holy Spirit. This is a week in which my life is going to get powerfully touched. I believe in the goodness of God, and I believe in a good Father. Then I believe it's His will to touch me. Heaven is aware of what's going on today. Don't limit what God can do through you. One of the problems you have to face is you kind of get in my head. I've already been there, done that. I remember when God touched me, so what do you got that's new? I wanted to come to you that I might impart some spiritual gift to you. Ask God to do again what He's done so many times. It is only the love of God and the power of God that can sustain you not to quit. Do not neglect your gift, which was given you through a prophetic message when the body of elders laid their hands on you. He shall baptize you with the Holy Spirit, When we hear and then we obey, then the gifts of the Spirit flow through us. There can still be more for you.
Well, I'd like to welcome to the Blueprint, Dr. Randy Clark.
Thank you. Thank you, Lois.
Oh man, Randy, this is awesome. And I always think about I always think about guests. Some guests I know, and I've known you for just a little while. We spent just a little bit of time together, and you had such an impact, on my life and the transition, because I think that sometimes we just kind of get stuck in a place and we don't think there is more, right? And then when somebody shares with you something that brings you to the point where you realize there's more, right? And then you start to not, fade, fade away from it, but you start to go towards it. And I mean, meeting you, I have to say this, man, that I met a lot of people in my life and in my lifetime, and man, I've never met a person more genuine, more humble than when I seen God use you, because sometimes God uses people, right? And you can't touch them, you can't talk to them, probably has security and stuff like that around them, so you can't touch them anyway. But I mean, you literally hung out with us. I mean, I think we had breakfast together. I think we had lunch together, man, and it was just an awesome experience. And I want to say, man, thanks for this opportunity to spend some time with you this evening.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be with you. I appreciate what you've done for your life.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And that's what I appreciate too. When you found out, when I seen what God was doing through you, right? Also, that was awesome. But the awesome part of that experience, when we sat down and I shared with you about what God had allowed me to do, you were just as I was appreciating you, you were appreciating me, and that was powerful in itself. And I want to thank you for that, because that was just awesome, man. And so as we get to know Randy, the first part of this is, we want to get to know Randy. And 3 questions within getting to know you is, number one, the importance and power of family. So, I mean, if you would tell the audience about, growing up, mom, dad, siblings, and kind of coming, bring it full fold. Because I know you mentioned your wife. You had to get up. I had to get up and tell her that it's going to be an hour-and-a-half show. So.
Well, Lois, I was born in Southern Illinois, and my dad had 8th grade education. I'm the first male in my family to go past the 8th grade, and I have 3 doctorates now. My brother and sister, they did finish their bachelor degrees, and but my mother had a profound impact on me. You might say that we were rather poor. I didn't have an inside bathroom until I was in the 2nd grade. We never had air conditioning as long as I was home. I didn't get air conditioning until I was gone. My mom and dad were empty nesters at 39 years old, so they had children young. And my mom would tell me when I was a little boy getting ready to get on the bus, you remember this, you're just as good as a doctor's kid. You're just as smart as a lawyer's kid. And she'd compare me with all these other professionals. And of course, where I live, my mother's only one of 2 people in the whole town had more than an 8th grade education. So, it was her speaking into my life that you can be pretty much anything you want to be. And I know my dad, they really emphasized education so that we could get out of poverty. And I was raised in a Christian home. I got under conviction at 7, and I accepted the Lord right 1 week before my 16th birthday. I was almost killed in a car accident at 18. I was healed. As a result of that car accident, I had really serious life-threatening conditions. And I was miraculously healed, and a revival broke out, and I got called to preach in that revival and preached my first sermon on November 22nd of 1970. And I was almost killed on October the 15th. And I was supposed to be in the hospital 49 to 77 days, but through prayer, I got healed. And that is what created my interest, though I was a Baptist, in healing. And and I remember the first day of going to college. I switched from a state school to a Christian school where I was majoring in religious studies. And I remember the first day I was in the bookstore, and I heard this impression so strong, and it was this, and it turned out to be true. And it was really odd for a young Baptist guy. The issue of your life will be the Holy Spirit. So the first book I bought, other than my textbook, was a book called The Holy Spirit. And in every time I was all the way through 4 years of college, I majored and minored, took all my electives in religious studies, and 3 more years at the Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville for a Master of Divinity. And then I was out of school until I was 60 some odd years old, and or 59, and went back to school for 3 years while I was traveling all over the world. But I've really tried to just everything I could take that dealt with the Holy Spirit, I tried to, because I knew that word was from the Lord, and it became true. That's what my life has been about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Family, education, faith.
Yeah.
Right. You answered that nice and smooth. Any siblings?
I have a brother who's 2.5 years younger, and a sister who's 11 months younger than him. And
wow. And I heard you mention your wife, so I know you got to tell you.
Yeah, I have been married since July of 75, and 4 adult children, all of them married. 3 of the 4 have 3 kids each. 2 of them want more, and the youngest one hasn't started having kids yet. So I'm expecting to be a patriarch and have at least 12 grandkids.
Yeah, we're kind of in the same. Well, there are 4 of us in my family, and then my wife has her brother and sister as well. And my wife got a little disappointed because everybody had grandkids, and we're I'm the oldest in my family. She's in the middle, and we had no grandkids. And so my daughter got married now, probably going 2 years, right? And 2 years, and we have a grandson. Well, we have a granddaughter by my godson. She's 8, and his wife is due in November. And then my daughter has a 14-year-old grandson, and she's due 14 months. And she's due in November. So they're starting to add up, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm pop.
Yeah, I'm I'm called Papa.
Pat Paw?
Yeah, Papa.
Now, that's a new one, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, my 3-year-old granddaughter, she just came up, put her head on my chest this morning, and they stayed all night with us last night. She says, "Papa, I love you. I just love you so much."
Yeah, I mean, they just take you, man. They take your heart and your breath. They take it all away.
Yeah, that's grandchildren reward for raising children.
I like that. I definitely like that. And so, I had when as we were going through the pandemic, right in the midst of the pandemic, and I was, kind of looking through Facebook. Occasionally I'm on Facebook, and I seen my mother's pastor and he was on a panel along with Noel Jones and Reverend Al Sharpton, and there was another pastor on there. And I was just looking at it, and I didn't really want to stop, but something led me to stop and take a look at what they were talking about. And so, and most of the time, Pastor Richardson is never, my mom's pastor, has never lost for words. as a Baptist pastor, he never lost for words. Give him a mic and he's ready to go. But he, in that pandemic, he wasn't saying anything. And on the panel, he was not saying a word. And so he said something I thought was very powerful. And it said, you know, Reverend Al Sharpton called him Doc. He said, "Hey, Doc, you kind of quiet over there," you know, like that. What you thinking about, like that? And he asked the question. So Reverend Richardson said, "Well, I was thinking, was the church relevant before the pandemic, and will it be relevant after the pandemic?" And so I had him on the show. I had him on the podcast with a number of other pastors, and the question was around your book, right? There is more. And I asked the question, is there is there more? And so talk a little bit about you know, the writing of the book, why you wrote the book, There Is More.
Well, the book had two purposes. One was to give a biblical foundation for the truth that beyond salvation, there is more to the Christian life than just being born again or justified, that there's more to the Christian life than that. That's wonderful, and that's the beginning, but that's not the ending. And the second reason of the purpose of the book was, you know, I got in January of '94, I went to Toronto, Canada to do a 3 or 4 day meeting. And that meeting exploded in a revival that lasted 6 nights a week for 12 and a half consecutive years. It was the longest protracted meeting in the history of North America. As a result of that, I got to travel all over the world. And prior to that, I had never been out of the United States. That's my first time to ever leave the States. Now I've been to like Brazil 120 times and 55 nations, and many of them many times. But I wrote the book to be an apologetic and a defense for that what was happening in my meetings really was God. And so I pointed out that there had been scores of thousands of churches planted as a result, scores of thousands. I know probably 50, 60,000 churches were started. At least 4 million people came to the Lord. And through the impact of people who went out. And that was just one part of the move of God that happened in '94 with myself going to Toronto with John Arnott, because I believe that what happened in Pensacola the next year was the same revival. What happened the next year in Smithton, in the cornfields of Missouri at Smithton, was the same revival. And what had happened with Rodney Howard-Browne the year before I went to Toronto was all part of one great big revival instead of 4 or 5 smaller ones. So those numbers I gave you, that's just that one stream that I was in. It wasn't the whole river of the revival. So that was the purpose, and give stories. And here's the fruit. And I believe that if people could see and know what God had done as a result of what happened in that move of God, they would believe that it was God, and they would really believe that there was more. And then once you realize there is more, because I remember before I was touched, I was asking God, there's got to be more. there's got to be more. And when I was touched earlier, actually about 10 years before I went to Toronto, I was touched. I was a Baptist pastor and got touched in my own church, and my church was turned upside down. And since then, I've got to preach in the Reformed denomination to try to move the whole denomination in the Netherlands toward openness to the gifts of the Spirit, because they wanted me to come in. The president of the denomination did. I'm working with a bishop in the Catholic Church next year near Pentecost to work with all the priests of his diocese. I've worked with Assemblies of God. I've worked with many of the new denominations in Brazil. That's the fastest growing movements in Brazil. I worked with the traditional Baptist church in Brazil, the largest ones they have, the largest one, the Charismatic Baptist Convention, and the largest Baptist church in South Africa and the largest Baptist church, or the oldest Baptist church and second largest in Argentina. So God opened the door. Like I've got to work with a lot of huge, like multiple thousand Methodist average attendance Methodist churches in Korea. I've just got to work with a lot of people. And part of the reason is I understand where they're coming from, their history and their theology, and I can use their language to help people become more open to the Holy Spirit in their life.
Yeah. And and I heard, I heard you say, one time before, in one of your testimonies, in one of your messages, and you were talking about, particularly in healing. I think you were writing a paper, or I don't know if it was your final paper, and you were talking about healing, because I think you did your thesis.
Yeah, my doctoral dissertation or thesis was on a study of the effects of Christian prayer upon chronic pain and loss of motion from surgically implanted materials. And it was a crossover between theology and medicine.
Right. And then you shared it.
Yeah.
And I think what did your professor had some comments?
One professor saw it. He was from SMU, Southern Methodist University, and this was a doctor of ministry thesis. It's supposed to have been like 120 pages. It was 399 pages. He said, "This is not a DMin. This is a PhD. I will accept this as a PhD if you'll come to Notre." He was going to be guest professor at Notre Dame University the next year in Indiana. I didn't do that, but another professor was on like a professional associate who was advising me, was a professor at Harvard for 23 years. Another professor was a psychiatrist at Vanderbilt that was advising me. One of my advisors, professional advisors, or professional associate, they call him, was a specialist in pain, a doctor who specialized in pain. And so everything I wrote, when I wrote about the Catholic Church, I got a specialist, one of the leading scholars in Catholicism, about the gifts of the Spirit. And then when I did the New Testament, I got Craig Keener to help me. He's a leading New Testament exegete, one of the leading, some people say the best in the world right now. And when I had theology, I got Old Testament. I got people already had doctorates in those fields to look at what I'd written and make sure that I was representing everything correctly and doing it correctly.
Right. Yeah. And I think you mentioned when I think you did something on healing. You was talking about healing, and somebody was not too encouraging when you wrote about healing.
Yeah. Well, one guy on the radio he attacked me for several years, almost every day on the radio, on 465 or 650, some hundreds of stations. And he'd say, I believe in the gifts of Spirit, and I believe healing's possible, but I do not believe it should be normative. Now, that normative word means happening on a regular occasion. And for me, I was pastoring, ordained as General Baptist and American Baptist for 14 years, and I had seen 5 healings in 14 years. And then when this team came from the Vineyard in Anaheim to my Baptist church in a small village of 120, my church didn't seat over 150 people. We had probably 50 people healed in 3 days, including my wife. And what was more interesting and more exciting than that was my church. I was the only person that had ever been to a charismatic or Pentecostal church to even just check them out. And it was all totally new, but my people got touched and they received more. And there was people who were more gifted than me in civil engineers, janitors at the high school, special education teachers, coal miners, prison guards. That's what most of my people were. Most of the men in my church were either a coal miner or a prison guard at what took over for Alcatraz. They built it in Southern Illinois there as main security building, prison. So I had what was really challenging to me at first was I was the pastor, but I had a lot of lay people that were flowing in like gifts of words of knowledge and healing and prophecy more than me. And I told my wife I was complaining about it, and she said, "Randy, that's gifts, but you're the pastor of the persons with the gifts, and you got to help them develop character, and you got to help them stay humble, and you got to make sure that the person who got the gift, you're just not going to have to pastor that gift. You're going to have to pastor the person with the gift, and just be thankful that God has given us people that can move in these gifts now." And I said, "Well, why didn't he give me more?" He said, "Well, if you could do everything, you wouldn't need anybody, and you'd get proud." So, and it was true, you know. But my greatest joy is to see other people discover the more of God and see them used. And I've had so many people I've prayed for that were touched by God and then literally did more than I've done. One guy I prayed for, Leif Hetland's led 1 million Muslims to the Lord in Pakistan. He's had quadriplegics walk. That's how things exploded for him in Pakistan when a quadriplegic guy was brought in and he gets healed. And he had never seen a healing either till we prayed for him and the power of God hit him. So same way with Heidi Baker, she's seen 1 million people come to the Lord. And she was a good missionary, but she had not seen this type of a harvest until she was touched in Toronto, and God gave me a prophetic word for her. And I tell people sometimes I get to be the donkey that Jesus rides into a church on.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. Yes. So it was pretty interesting in my conversations with the pastors during that time when I was asking them about more, and I was talking about the supernatural lifestyle, um, talking about signs, wonders, and miracles, and I was asking the question, because many of our churches, right, many of our churches don't really deal with that, in terms of the supernatural and signs, wonders, and miracles. And, they kind of were hesitant, to cross that line. And why do you think, because one of the gentlemen, and I think he mentioned Toronto.
Yeah.
Right. I've been with you when a young lady doing the healing school, and I think she was, we were all, I think you were doing
Yeah.
manifestation, and I remember you speaking to her because she started burping. I think she was burping and stuff like that, and then you stopped her, and you kind of corrected, no, that's that's not something God does. And so some will pick up on what happened in Toronto, because they were saying that there was a number of people maybe walking around barking like a dog, so forth and so on. And of course, I know you're not going to allow those things to happen, but they do happen. But people will pick up on those things, those the small things, and forget about the other things that God had manifested on that time. So why do you think that some churches or pastors not willing to cross that line when it comes to there is more and signs, wonders, and miracles in this time?
I think there's a parallel to the first Great Awakening that came before we were the United States, when we were the colonies, and in New England and Connecticut under Jonathan Edwards. And history, our American history, calls that revival that happened under him and Whitfield and Wesley and Davenports and others, it's called the Great Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
But when it was happening, it wasn't called the Great Awakening. Contextually, in the moment while it was happening, it was called the Great Noise. And a lot of people, including a guy named Chauncey, wrote against it. And there's always critics. Bishops of the Anglican Church locked Wesley out, wouldn't let him in. I stood in at the front of a door where Wesley, it was locked to him. Several churches just locked. You can't even come in. So whatever happens that's novel or bizarre is usually picked up on by people who are uncomfortable with what's going on. Not just that, but just the whole move of God. And they look for the most bizarre thing and they characterize it as if that was the common thing. I could probably I've been in hundreds, 180 days a year, and sometimes 5 meetings a day, often 5 meetings a day, 180 days a year to 254 meetings a year, 254 days a year, for 27 years. And I could put on both hands the number of times I was in a meeting where anybody made any type of an animal sound.
Right.
But I know what happened more than that, but it wasn't a lot for me. I didn't see it happen a lot. And I never really, because of my being a student of church history and a student of revival, of history revival, I knew this would be an issue, that people would make an issue out of it. That's why I never encouraged it myself. But having said that, what was much, much, much more common was people weeping, people laughing, people falling to the floor. Some people were not able to get up for hours. That was much more common. It really was for me. It was a renewal because I had become dry and was on the verge of a nervous breakdown when I went to see Rodney Howard-Browne, South African evangelist, and was touched. And then revival broke out in my church in St. Louis, and then from that in Toronto, and then all over the world. And it's still going on. But another reason besides just uncomfortableness with emotion and the exploitation and exaggeration of the most bizarre things to make it sound like it was a 3-ring circus. One of the things that is really the theological reason is, and that's why, and it's also the same reason why Pentecostalism was spoken so negatively of in when it first started in 1901 through particularly Azusa Street in 1906 and then early years. Pentecostalism actually is a direct challenge to the major theology of mainline denominations, because they taught, Protestants, not the Catholic Church, but the Protestant Church, from the beginning of the Reformation pretty much on, taught that tongues and interpretation, prophecy, healing, and miracles, those 5 gifts, ended with the death of the apostles or the canonization of the Bible. Pentecostalism taught that they had not ended, and God was restoring them. And so if you have a group of churches that's teaching something that directly contradicts what you've been teaching, it causes there to be opposition to that. And so there was initially a great threat. And it really wasn't until the 60s with the charismatic movement that began to really change. Today, though, most people don't know, Lowe's, that 80% of all Christians south of the equator have a Pentecostal charismatic type of experience, whether they're Baptist or whatever.
Right.
So many of them. And it's really the church is the strongest south of the equator. They believe in the supernatural so much more. And you think of that, there weren't any Pentecostals till 1901. So and now it's a huge amount. It's the largest group of Christians other than the Catholic Church is the charismatic Pentecostal, or what I call third wave evangelicals, that's like Baptists and Presbyterians and Methodists, that now believe that the gifts of the Spirit still happen, but they don't necessarily believe to be baptized in the Spirit you have to speak in tongues, though they will, like myself, they have the gift of tongues, but they may not have spoken in tongues when they were baptized in the Spirit. Like in my case, I spoke in tongues at 19. And I wasn't baptized in the Spirit till I was 32, and then again at 37, and then again at 41. But at the same time, because I see such a diversity of this experience in the New Testament itself, Book of Acts, I don't have any problem with somebody else saying, well, that wasn't my experience. My experience was I did speak in tongues when I was baptized. Well, I have no problem with that. I see that in the Bible too, you know.
Right.
So it's what's called third wave evangelicals. Just allows for more diversity, but they do believe that healings for today, miracles for today, tongues for today, prophecy still for today.
Right. And so I think it leads to the question is, how do we now experience, because I grew up, my mom, who's on, she's probably listening right now, but we grew up as a family in the Baptist church, my grandmother, so forth and so on. And yeah, a lot of the, yeah, she put up this, yeah, your mother's watching.
Yeah, I see that. I see that.
And so, I just remember there was a difference between when in New York, going to a Baptist church, and then going to the South with my grandmother in the Baptist church, and how the Spirit moved in the Baptist church there. And then as a young man, at 14, I joined a Pentecostal church.
Uh-huh.
And this is during the time, A.A. Allen and a number of the great preachers of that time were, evangelists going around, and so we were really fully into it,
Yeah.
into that experience, and it almost ran over into eventually more emotional things, rather than having, the, like we had in the past, the glory of God manifesting himself, and all those different things. So how do we get back? I think the question is, how do we experience, God like that? How do we have that experience with him now, in regards to, and then, and the other part of it is, spending some time with you, and knowing that there are those who are called, right, for the perfecting of the saints, for the working of the ministry. And how do we get move people from being spectators, right, to
Right.
actually into ministry?
Right. Well, I think first of all, it begins with just emphasizing what the Bible emphasizes, and that is that God, when Jesus ascended, he gave gifts to the church, some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of ministry. So those 4 to 5 offices or functions, gifts, their role, each of them, is to equip the saints in order that the saints can be involved in ministry. And it used to be, those were given to equip the saints, they are given to do the ministry rather than to equip the saints to do the ministry.
Right.
So there had to be a change in the way people were understanding. And most of the translations now doesn't have that comma in there, and really does understand it, that the pastors and teachers and evangelists and prophets and apostles each one of those has a role in equipping the saints for the work of ministry. And I think the Bible emphasizes that one of the main reasons Jesus died was not just to be able to forgive us and get us to heaven, but to bring the power of heaven to us
Mm-hmm.
and into us, so that we can advance his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. He taught us to pray that in the Lord's Prayer: thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't think that there is anything more than getting saved, put right, and justified, and then hanging on and trying to be good until Jesus came or till you died, that's there's not much to look forward to between the moment you get saved and when you go on meet the Lord. But if you believe that the gifts of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit wants to come upon you and empower you and allow you to co-labor with Jesus, allow you to hear communications. You know, one of the reasons why miracles are frowned upon by many of the churches, and you ask what's one of the reasons, it's this word revelation. And it's used in theology. You got general revelation. You look at nature and you can see there was a God that made this. It's just too intricate, you know. And so nature itself, Paul said in Romans 1, helped us to point us to God. But then there was what's called special revelation. That's from the Bible, that shows us the ways of God in history, and tells us what God's like. And that is limited to the Bible. So you got natural revelation and special revelation. So I talk about in the New Testament, you know, Paul had a dream, and they understood that meant that they were to go into Macedonia, the Macedonian call, rather than going to Asia through that dream. So they got up and they went at once. So they were led by dreams. They were led, their angelic things. They were led by the moving of the Spirit and prophecy and things. Well, the Bible actually tells us that early church moved, and it wasn't just the apostles. It was the hand of the Lord in Acts 13. The hand of the Lord was with the ones who were scattered while the apostles remained in Jerusalem, which meant the hand of the Lord was a euphemism for the Holy Spirit, and it meant the power of God.
Mm-hmm.
So you have lay people being used in the New Testament, and the New Testament itself actually tells us that, and Jesus, my last book I just wrote just came out a few weeks ago, Intimacy with God.
Mm-hmm.
Its whole focus looks at the upper room discourse, where Jesus was telling his disciples the most important stuff before he's going to be crucified. And it was really about, I want you to have intimacy with me. And if you'll have intimacy with me, which means you can't be a rebel. You got to obey me. If you love me, you will obey me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do that, love me and obey me, I and the Father by the Spirit, we're going to come to you, and he's going to make known what is mine and make it known to you by the Spirit. We're going to reside with you. We're going to make our home with you. And so it goes like this: out of intimacy and obedience comes revelation. Now, I'm not talking about the revelation that tells, like the Bible. I don't mean that. I mean specific revelation. For example, when the Lord led you to start working with boys and girls clubs, that was his leading.
Mm-hmm.
He made you aware that you were supposed to do that.
Right.
You knew it. That's what I call specific, not special, but specific. When 21 years ago, when I moved from St. Louis to the East Coast, gave up my church and sold my home and moved my whole family here, I had specific revelation. My daughter had been having dreams for 2 years that she hadn't told me about, that we were going to move to the East Coast. And so to understand that this life we live, we can be led by God, and we can be given words to help people. We can be given words to help us come into faith, to see miracles. Words of knowledge, they're called. And when as Moses said in Exodus chapter 33, if I found favor in your sight, then teach me. And another translation says, show me your ways, that I may know you. And I think in the end of that chapter, he said, now show me your glory. Now, you mentioned the word glory. In the glory of the Lord, there's miracles that take place. But I believe it's in coming to understand better the ways of God, the way he communicates to us specifically,
Mm-hmm.
not new revelation about how to get saved or the doctrines of the faith, but whether or not we're to, like I said, move halfway across the United States. Or every preacher talks about, I feel led of God, to the message they've been given. And so this type of specific revelation, I'll make it simple for our Baptist, Methodist, and Presbyterian friends, Lutheran friends. If you're telling somebody the gospel that's lost, they don't know God, and you're sharing the gospel with them, and they start crying, you're going to be encouraged. And you're going to think God's dealing with them, and you're going to spend more time trying to explain it to the gospel to them and lead them to Jesus. And because you see that God's drawing them. How do you see it? you see the effect of the Spirit that's causing them to cry. In like manner, there's ways that you can see the effect of the Spirit in healing, physical manifestations you can see, feelings they have often of heat or energy inside the body, or the pain beginning to move or get better. So we can learn how God communicates to us, not about new special revelation, but about specific things for our life. When I was 19 years old, I got a book by Pat Boone, and it was called A New Song. And it's nothing big about it. And today it would be, you know, you'd say, why are you so excited about it? But at the time, he was talking about, he would feel like God say, invite somebody over or do this or go see somebody. And when he'd get there, he'd realize this was the divine setup, that God was in that, and there would be something good that would come out of that. And he had story after story of that in that book, which came out, I think, in 1971 or two, or,
Mhm.
71 or two when I was reading it. And I remember Lois saying, God, I didn't know you did this kind of stuff. But if there's a Christianity like this, where you're leading people like this with these, what I call now, I use the language divine appointments,
Mhm.
then I want to be a part of it. So that was where it kind of started for me, in that sense of God speaking to the issue of your life be the Holy Spirit. And then this thing of this moment where I said, God, I want, if you're doing this, this is the kind of Christianity I want to be in. And then I just, because of my own healing, I pursued healing, and I began to see healing. And then when I met John Wimber, he heard the audible voice of God. John Wimber was a leader of the Vineyard movement.
Mhm.
And he'd been a professional musician, and was got saved late in life, later in life. I mean, not late, but later in life. And he'd been using drugs and smoking and doing all types of stuff and playing in Las Vegas. And he was a manager for the Righteous Brothers. And when he got saved, his life radically changed. And so years later, when I meet him, I'm pastoring this little bitty Baptist church. There's nobody knows who I am. And he hears God the first two times we met, said to him audibly, like you're hearing my voice. And that only happened to him 5 times his whole life. And I've never had it happen in my life where I heard a voice like you're hearing mine. But it said that one day I'm going to send, speaking of myself, one day I'm going to send him around the world. And I'm going to use him to pray for people and teach the word, and call, and people are going to be, God was going to do it, not me. I don't believe I do it. God does it. But he said, I'm going to use him, and I'm going to cause people to be filled with the Holy Spirit and activated in gifts. That's what I'm going to use him for. And because of that, when Toronto happened, I knew this is, and John Wimber called me and said, Randy, what I heard about you, January 84, it's starting right now, January 94, 10 years later.
Mm. Wow. Awesome, man. Yeah. And then, when we were in Maryland, right, and I was in the school, was in the school of healing,
Yeah.
and we were learning, I think, the 5-step prayer model.
Mm-hmm.
We were dealing with, yeah,
How to get words of knowledge.
how to get words of knowledge, um, impartation, manifestation,
Yeah.
and also how you experience God,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember, man, he's talking about, like, some people feel heat, some people feel like they're on fire, and somebody, when the glory of God comes on you, feel a weight. And I remember I remember, I don't think my wife was there. I think she had left, but I remember, man, you praying for me, and I remember the glory of God coming on, that weight, heaviness coming on over me, and that fire, like I was like like stuff was on fire,
Yeah.
and just to see God, and I've seen people who really work at trying to motivate people to get to know God, to come to God, so forth. And so I've seen people, sweating, and all kind of things like, and to understand in that moment how God uses, how God uses people. And I seen how he was using you, Pastor Paul, at the time, and being in that experience of words of knowledge and all those different things, and seeing at young kids in the school, 12-year-old, 15-year-old kids in the school, and seeing them giving words of knowledge at the
Yeah.
end in one day. I'm not talking about like, okay, it takes weeks, school that day, that night, people were giving words of knowledge. It was messing with my head. I mean, literally messing with my head. And I think it took me like 2 days. It was the last day. It was Thursday, Friday, and the last day we were having lunch. And I was just, a word came to me. The word was called stuck. And I remember having it, I wrote it down in my phone. And that night, when you asked for words of knowledge, and everybody was getting up saying words of knowledge, and then your son looked at me, and you looked at me, he said, "Lowe's, you have a word?" I said, "Yeah, stuck." And then he says, "Anybody here stuck?" Like that, and anxiety, depression, so forth and so on. And then I think 15 people got up, stood up, and then you said, "Okay, they're yours." Like, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with them? So, and to see God, use me, right?
Yeah.
He was using me, and to say it was just an awesome. I just say that changed my whole mindset. Um, and so it talk a little bit about that, and people being able to get ready, preparing people to do those things, to what those things mean, because many of us don't know what it is. I didn't know.
Well, I think one of the things is when we confuse emotion for spirit, emotionalism for spirit,
Mm-hmm.
that can get in the way because it's almost like a performance. I got to work it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just try to teach. I just try to help people understand because, I got my first word of knowledge after a 5-minute telephone call. I didn't know this guy asked me, "Do you believe in words of knowledge?" Because I thought this woman in my church was going to die before the team could get there to teach us about how to pray for the sick more effectively by learning how to partner with the Lord. It's the same way of learning how to do evangelism is learning how to take the word, see what God's doing in people you're talking to, and it's very similar, it's parallel. So this guy said, "Do you believe in words of knowledge?" I said, "Sure." 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 8. He said, "Oh, it's good you know the address, but do you know how to move in them?" I said, "No, I don't." And he just told me, "Here's 5 ways you can get a word of knowledge." And within a few days, because he told me what to look for, within a few days, I actually had 2 different words of knowledge and ended up in people getting healed both times. And, in 2 days, 3 days after I hear this teaching, 5 minutes on the telephone, I have 2 healings. Well, I only had 5 for the first preceding 14 years. It was like, oh my gosh, I know what the Lord wants to do. He wants to heal that woman I just talked to. Um, because I felt the pain in my own body. Now, some people has impressions, or pictures and things, and the different ways that God can use our faculties to speak to us. Um, and when you learn that, and part of it is a little bit of trial and error because you're trying to discern, well, is that impression my impression, or was that God?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've actually been in meetings where I actually said, "I'm almost certain this next word is not God. I'm almost certain I'm missing it." And like in one case, I said crowbar. I said I couldn't figure out how crowbar could have anything to do with healing. And so I saved it for last because it was the most bizarre word I had, and it came just as an impression. And when I said it, a woman starts weeping because she had just heard the Lord speak to her in worship. And the Lord had said, I'm going to heal your crowbar issue tonight. And she'd been a victim of domestic violence, and her ex-husband had beat her with a crowbar and broke her jaw, caused her to go deaf in her ear, and broke her neck. And the Lord said, and it's not the hearing that you want to be, it's the healing of your spirit and your emotions you want to get healed, but I'm going to give it all to you. And so just a few minutes after she hears that as an impression, I get up and say, I don't think this is God, but I just heard the word crowbar. Well, she got healed.
Wow.
Got her hearing back. So sometimes you can't figure out at all how it can be God. But as we, by trial, it's like by practice, we begin to discern between when it's the Lord and when it's just us trying to hear. And I actually will tell people if I've got what I think is a prophetic word, but it's real serious, and if I'm wrong, it could be damaging. I really try to go to the low place of humility and say, listen, I wouldn't even give this word to you because I'm not sure it's God. And if it's not God, it could mess your life up. So if this doesn't make sense to you, if it's not more or less confirming what you feel like God's already been saying to you, if it doesn't make sense, then it's not God. It's me missing God. Let it be like a water on a duck's back. Just
let it roll.
Just let go of it. And that's the only way I'd have the courage to do it because, and then I would say, and I pretty much know if I was right or wrong by their expression on their face. Because if they look shocked or start crying, okay, that was right. And I always tell them when I'm done, I said, now I'll say, now, I want you to tell me what part of that was right, what part was wrong. If it wasn't all right, tell me what part I missed. That's how we having that feedback loop. That's the way we really learn to become better, more accurate.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I remember when the Lord and I hadn't seen Paul, Pastor Paul, in about, I don't know, 30 years or so. And I mentioned earlier, he came out of nowhere. He gave me a call, and so, I mean, having that awakening, was very powerful for me, and so when now you transition from being a pastor, right, and God led you started what, Global Awakening.
Yeah.
Right. So you're no longer a pastor, but talk a little bit about what Global Awakening is and some of the things that you guys are doing. And if someone wanted to get involved, talk a little bit about that.
Okay. First of all, I was a pastor for 30 years, and I've been in ministry now, be 51 years this October. Global Awakening is the ministry that I started. I started out calling it Randy Clark Renewal Ministries, and then I didn't want to put my name in it, so then I called it Renewal Ministries International. But I remember I was down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and the renewal was about the joy and the laughter and just being renewed. And I was a little bit discouraged, and a friend asked me what was wrong. I said, I don't want to give my life for renewal. I want to give my life for something even more important than that, revival. And I said, but not just a local church revival. I want it to be, and not even a regional revival. Matter of fact, I want to be involved in awakening. I want to give my life to a global awakening. And I said, I'm changing the name of my ministry to that, because that's what I want it to be. I want to have impact around the world. So we work with all denominations with many denominations we have been invited into. And every time we go, though, it's because that group or that leader is hungry, wants more. And so we take teams with us. I've taken over 5,000 people internationally with me and they're my ministry team. As a matter of fact, in Manaus, Brazil, there's a church, it got up to around 50-some thousand, but at the time I was going there, it was 25, 30,000 average attendance. And Aaron was the executive pastor. he said, Randy, this church nicknamed your teams the miracle workers. We've been there several times. And then he told me, he said, but there's one thing they believe that you lied to them about. I said, lie to them? What do they think I lied to them about? They said, well, you get up here and you say that only 10% of I usually have 80 to 100 people with me on a team. And only 10% are ministers and the other 90% are lay people just like them. Well, they think that's a lie. They think you've gone all over the world and found the most powerful healers you could find, and now they travel with you and you pay them to pray. They don't believe this. They're just lay people like them, but they are. And on our teams, well, I mean, we'll have Methodists and Mennonites, Presbyterians and Pentecostals, Lutherans and Catholics, and we have all types of people on our teams. And it doesn't make any difference. You can't tell, because we're all just, they want to be used of God, and they want to hear from God, and they want to learn how to hear. So we have online training. It was called Christian Healing Certification Program I developed. I think it's the best thing I have for training. We use it even in the seminary. We have like I said, I think 4 master's programs, or 5 counting Master of Divinity, Doctor of Ministry, and Doctor of Theology seminary. Then we have a College of Ministry that's not accredited because we can't do that in Pennsylvania online. But we have another college outside that we work with that will give credit for all the courses they take through our College of Ministry, that has some of the best practical training for healing and prophecy. So, and we're a teaching ministry and equipping ministry. And we have a 2-year school you come here and live, and it's a 9-month, and then you can come back a second year. And then there's a 3rd year by invitation only into like an internship. And I wanted to mention to you, Lo, because I just want to shout out about a young man I'm very proud of. His dad came over from Ethiopia. He's an apostolic leader in Ethiopia. He's got a large church, a couple thousand in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. But this was his son. His name is Paul Hanfree. And he, a few years ago, started a church. He was my intern for over a year. And we traveled all the world together. Besides his father, I'm his other spiritual father, just a little lighter complected. But he's an amazing young man, and he's got an amazing church. He started, hundreds of people has already been saved in just 2 or 3 years. And I remember he traveled with me for a year, and then he went back and did a meeting with his dad in Ethiopia, and then another meeting in I forgot there's a big mountain there, and there's in Africa, biggest mountain in Africa. I forgot the name of the country, but anyway, he was doing these 2 meetings, and he said, "Come, Holy Spirit," and he waited, and all of a sudden, like rows of people were just knocked over, and his dad looked at him and said, "Who are you?" And because his son in 1 year had such a radical, change, and he was probably by that time in his late 20s. Mm-hmm. And but he told me, he said, "Randy, I watched God be so faithful that I came into faith watching God be so faithful that I knew that if I just wait, he'd show up." And so one of my spiritual sons is the CEO of Heidi Baker's ministry now in Mozambique. And I remember the time he came and said, Randy, my teaching outsold yours. I sold more teaching tapes at this conference than you did. And I wasn't threatened by it, because what father doesn't want their kids to be better and more successful than them? And so my life is given, and I'm working. We have a network of churches. We have these different ways of training. I have associates. I've got a young guy, man, he's a preaching machine. He goes to Kenya all the time, does national meetings for the Assemblies of God for Kenya. And he was I mean, he was dying of an overdose, of meth overdose, didn't know God, dying in Alabama, and a beam stepped out of light, and electricity went through his body, gets gloriously healed. And instead of dying overnight, they can't find anything wrong with him the next morning. And God led him to come to my school. And so I took him and mentored him, and he's now on staff. I pay his salary, or my ministry does, and he goes all over. He's a preaching, like I said, preach machine. And I have another young guy, he's like 25 years old, and I learned from him when it came to words of knowledge, because he would get words of knowledge about their so and so and so and so, and be a husband and wife. He'll get the number of their house or their address, and he'll get some diseases, and it'll be their diseases. And I never had addresses of anything like that until he traveled with me for around a year. And I started getting some of the stuff he was getting. So I think I was getting mentored by my mentoree on that. Matter of fact, I got healed I was asking one time, do you have a word of knowledge in our headquarters? We were doing a small school, and people would come in, a healing school. And I was going down the line. He was a student then. And I said, Brian, do you have a word? And as a matter of fact, I highlight him in this new book, Intimacy with God. 3 of the stories are his case studies of words of knowledge and healing. And he said, yeah, I do. I said, well, what is it? He said, somebody's got herniated disc in the cervical area of the neck. And I did. I had 4 herniated discs in my neck. And he didn't know that. And then he said, and the Lord told me, whoever this is, your birthday is February the 18th, 1952. Now, that's my birthday. He didn't know that. And it created such a gift of faith in me. I've been being prayed for over a year. Got hurt in Nigeria when a big guy fell and jerked me off my feet because he grabbed hold of my wrist, and my head went into his chest. And that's how I got the 4 herniated discs. And I'd been prayed for a year, and I hadn't been healed. But see, that word of knowledge that he had, I knew it was God, and I knew I was about to be healed. And when he prayed, I was healed.
Wow.
So we're here, and we're a teaching training ministry. And I have like both Brian and William, those guys I'm talking about. I have a young woman that's on staff. She's brilliant. She graduated from Regent with a 4.0, and she went through our schools, and we have Mike Hutchings. He's Dr. Hutchings. He works a lot in Black churches, and he works a lot in the military for psychiatrists. Ask him to come in, because we were in Champaign-Urbana, a big vineyard church, about 3,000 people, and this retired master sergeant in the military was having really severe back problems, and his wife was having severe headaches and things, and he was going to have surgery. And he wanted me to pray for him. And on the way there, I felt like the Lord said, tell Mike he's supposed to lead, and I will assist him. And when I told Mike that, when we were on the way to this guy, just walking to him, before he got there, the Lord gave him a download, supernatural download from heaven about how to pray for people with severe PTSD. He ministered to him, and he instantly got healed by the next day. He didn't have to, his back pain was gone. His wife was healed. And Mike has seen hundreds and hundreds of people. He gets invited in by psychiatrists, these big forts, to pray. So we have a lot of people on staff that's involved in different things. But it all deals with healing, inner healing, physical healing, impartation, people being baptized in the Spirit, revival, renewal. That's what we're about.
Yeah. And I know Paulus well. We've had him at the church in Mount Vernon here.
Oh, you've had Paul's?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Right. He's a great guy.
Yeah. Just awesome. Just Pastor Paul right there.
Yeah. Hi, Paul.
he's and Paulus came up. He was a part of the School of Healing.
Yeah.
Igniting the next generation. And that was he's an awesome young man. I actually met his wife too as well.
Yeah. She's beautiful. I told him, I said, "You did well, son. You really you caught a keeper there. She's beautiful and brilliant and really anointed. And they're a super couple, and I'm so glad that they planted that church in the Washington D.C. area. Anyone listening, looking for a good church, especially if you're younger, you're going to really like Paul.
Yeah.
And friend, I don't know the name of the church, or I'd tell it.
Yeah, I did have the name of the church because I know he was in the church with his dad.
Yeah.
And then what is Overflow City Church?
Okay.
Overflow City Church I think it's in Maryland, right? The area.
Yeah. I think it is in Maryland. Silver Springs, isn't it?
I don't know.
Maybe not.
I'll find out.
Okay.
I'll find out in next week, man. Huh? Silver
Silver
Springs, yeah.
Springs, Maryland. Yeah.
Silver Springs, Maryland. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, just and you had a team. I had spoken to you by email, and you actually sent the team up to Mount Vernon, and they stayed at the house here with my wife and I and kids, and they had 3 nights with us. Friday night, Saturday doing all day, and then they will get our guest preacher for the Sunday morning. It was an awesome experience. Every one of them were amazing, and there was a young man, I can't remember his name. He was 17 at the time. I think he had gone to Brazil with you.
Yeah.
And he had prayed for someone in Brazil that got healed at 17 years old, and he spoke on Friday night, and he blessed our church.
Good.
You know, with the word of God. It was just he was just so amazing. All of them were amazing. I mean, it was just an amazing time, and they were in your school.
Yeah. And I picked from the school. I picked my interns from the school, and I've had 43 people that's sometimes have more than one. Not usually, but sometimes I have 43 people that's been interns for about a year each. And I have a lot of people that almost all the interns end up full-time ministry. When we send out every spring for 2 months, our second year students, we put them in teams and send them all over the United States, and some even go internationally.
Wow. And then Mark Dreyer.
Marcus. Yeah, Mark. I called him Marcus, but Mark Dreyer. Yeah, he was with me for like 2 years. Digert. Marcus Digert.
Marcus Daggert, yes.
Yeah. He had Creative Miracles. He was with me in let's see. It's Oklahoma, I think. Tulsa. And on this one trip, he had 3 people got Creative Miracles. And because he had a creative miracle. God created him for him a new kidney.
Wow.
He had a lot of healings, and he's still getting healed a lot.
Yes. Yeah, I just recently because he was up here at I attend Harvest Time, so he was up at Harvest Time.
I mean, he has a guy who's very high up in Bank of America, like a vice president of Bank of America.
David Benton.
Yeah, David Bennett. He works with him. I mean, he works with Marcus, and Marcus is kind of mentoring him, and he's very good. And he goes even down and teaches on business and stuff in Latin America when he do church meetings down there. And
I hosted a Lifestyle 7 Spheres of Influence life group for Harvest Time, and David Benton was a part of it. Marketplace ministry development.
Right. Yeah, he's really good at that.
Yeah, very good. And My wife had a question. She asked, "Can you briefly talk a little bit about the five-step prayer model?"
Okay, it sounds mechanical, and I hate that people think when they hear it, oh, that sounds mechanical, because it's definitely not. It's actually very, very relational. And it starts out with the premise is that we really are not the ones that heal. God in us is the one who heals by the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit can come on them, the Holy Spirit working through us, but it's not us. Jesus said, I can do nothing to myself. I can only do what I see the Father doing. And so the first step is just the interview, finding out what's wrong with them, trying to figure out by the interview, asking certain questions, what's probably the root cause of the sickness or the pain, finding out if it's an afflicting spirit, finding out if it's a curse, finding out if it's lifestyle, finding out if it's genetic, finding out if it's they just caught it, if it's a natural cause, an accident, finding out, so you know how to pray. Because if it's inner healing that's blocking it, you got to do the inner healing before you can pray for the healing. If it's an afflicting spirit, you don't pray for healing. You cast the demon out. That's afflicting, causing the pain. So you're in the interview and you try to help them understand how God works. You tell them they don't have to do anything. Matter of fact, I tell them, please don't pray while I'm praying for you. I want you instead to expect to get healed and pay attention to your body and tell me if you begin to feel anything, interrupt me. And I said, you might feel something. My faith isn't in what you feel, it's in the promises of God. But like if I'm leading someone to the Lord and they start crying, I get encouraged. If I'm praying for someone for healing, they get hot or feel heat or energy in their body, or their pain starts alleviating, I get encouraged. It helps my faith to persevere in my prayer and not give up. In the interview, I also try to let them know, I tell people I train, I said, listen, you're not praying for a tumor. You're not praying for a disease. You're not ministering to a disease. You're ministering to a person who has the disease. And so whether or not they get healed, you really can't control that. But you can control whether or not they feel honored, respected, and loved. And so I don't want them guilting them. I don't want them, treating them unlovingly. And so one is, know who they are, be kind, be gentle, be loving, and help them to know why you're asking them these things. Because I want to move them from thinking one day after this prayer, maybe a week or two or three or a month from now, I can get healed, to say, no, you can be healed right now. And so I want you to pay attention. So out of that interview, the next step is you make it, and it's not really a step, it's just a natural process. You try to figure out, okay, what's wrong? Make a diagnostic decision and determine how you're going to pray. And if you pray that way and it doesn't work, you'd be like, I wouldn't want to go to a doctor who thought I had something, gave me a test, and it proved I didn't have that way. That wasn't the cause. He just quits. I said, well, give me another test. So, all right, let's switch the way we're praying. Let's come at this a different direction. Or in the prayer selection, most all the prayers for healing in the Bible are never prayers of petition, though they're fine, they're legal, but the ones that's recorded are almost always commanding prayers. And in the commanding prayer, the people have to understand you're not commanding God, you're commanding the body, the disease, the organ, whatever it is, you're commanding it. You're commanding the tumor to die. You're commanding that bone to move. And so you're speaking in the authority that seated with Christ in heavenly places. And so you're not commanding God. So then when you actually do start to pray, especially I encourage what's called body life. If you're in a group, there could be many people praying for each other at the same time. So you don't want to be loud. You don't have to be loud. Authority is not by how loud you are. And it really can be disrupting to somebody else praying close by if you get real loud. So I tell them, I want to teach you a way to pray that you could do it not just on the platform in front of thousands where you throw your coat on somebody or hit them in the head and slap them and whatever, yell at them. I want to teach you a way you could pray that's so natural. My mentor said, I want you to learn how to naturally move in the supernatural without getting religious or weird. And so when you begin to pray, you don't have to use a lot of words. You speak to the condition. And I tell them in the interview, as long as my hand's on your shoulder, I'm still praying for you, even if I'm not talking, even if I'm not saying anything, because prayer is also listening. It's just not talking, it's talking and listening. And I want you to feel free to interrupt me anytime you begin to feel something's changing. And then usually in the interview, I'll ask them, okay, how long you had this? Anything happened in your life that was leading up to this? So I'm trying to look for those psychosomatic causes. And then I also tell them that about 50% of the people that get healed, a little more than 50% of the people, they feel heat and energy before they get healed. But a little less than 50%, they don't feel anything and they get healed. And some don't get healed until they try to do something they can't do. So I will ask you to try to do something, but it was not an interruption if you do tell me. And so anytime that I'm praying and they say, I'm feeling this, then I just thank the Lord. Thank you, Lord. I think we should be like little children.
Yeah.
If you realize all of a sudden it's just not you praying, but now God showed up himself and he's there with us, then we honor his presence, we thank him, we celebrate it, and it helps the person that's being prayed for to realize, wow, this guy knows something I don't. He's realizing this is good, and it helps their faith. And then, so after you pray, after a short time, you just stop. Say, because a lot of people won't interrupt you. Did you feel anything? I prayed for a woman just recently, a few weeks ago, who had ALS. And I prayed for her and told her I wanted her to interrupt me and tell me if she felt anything, but she didn't. And I stopped after about 5 minutes of prayer, 3 minutes of prayer, and said, did you feel anything? She said, heat. And I asked her where, and she told me. And so I told her, that's good. And we're going to pray again. And we prayed for about a half an hour, many of those short times interviewing what's going on. So you speak to the condition, you stop and re-interview and find out, is anything happening? And if nothing's happening, it doesn't mean the first time we'll switch. I will pray sometimes the same prayer going at something 4 or 5 times, and maybe for 10 minutes sometimes before they feel anything. And sometimes as soon as you start, they start getting healed. It's different every time,
Yeah.
So, and then there's times that I've prayed and nothing happened. And then the Lord gave me another word to ask a question. I asked the question. I realized, all right, based on the answer she just gave me, I've been praying wrongly. This is not a natural cause of this blindness for 6 years. This is caused by an afflicting spirit. And I had a gift of faith. I said, now I'm going to pray for you one more time. This time when you open your eyes, you're going to see. Because I really understood, because she went blind the moment her dad died, and she was touching her dad when he died. And I just knew, okay, that's what it is, and prayed, commanded that to leave, and she opened her eyes and she could see. So you pray and you re-interview, and you may go through those cycles several times until either they're healed or they run out of time, they got to go, or you're stuck. And if they're stuck, you thank God for what he did do. This is what I call so you interview step 1, diagnostic decision and prayer selection step 2, prayer ministry step 3, stop and re-interview step 4, and maybe pray again. Usually we do. And then the last step is a post-prayer recommendation. And this is really important. So what happens if they weren't healed? And what happens if you feel like they weren't healed because they don't have an understanding of healing, and they don't have an expectation of healing, or another way of saying it, they don't have enough faith? You don't tell them that. You don't blame them. You don't say you didn't get healed because you don't have enough faith, because the word Satan means the accuser of the brethren. And when we minister to somebody, we don't want to get in his role of accusing them. The parakletos, the word for the Holy Spirit that's in John 14-16, is a Greek word called parakletos. And that means, and why it's often translated comforter in King James, counselor, helper, guide, and even advocate in 1 John 2:1. It's the same Greek word, because it literally means the one who's called to your side to help you in your need.
Yes.
So your need determines the title that he's coming to you as. So we're there to help, not to accuse.
Mm.
So even if it's true, the issue that's hindering is a lack of understanding, lack of faith, then I give them some scriptures to memorize, some tapes to listen to, CDs to listen to, a book to read that will help them in their understanding, which will help them in their faith. And then set up, okay, come back next week. We're going to pray again. No accusation at all. And the other thing, sometimes people say they have a gift of faith, and they'll say, I have the gift, God's going to heal you. They pray and they don't get healed. Now, I think if the person who did that and said that blames the persons, well, I was right, you would have been healed if you would have believed. They don't understand the gift of faith. If they're moving in the gift of faith, whatever they say is based because God's told them what he's going to do, and he's given them his faith to work with, and it never fails. And it will always produce what you say if you're having a gift of faith. And if it doesn't, then you need to humble yourself and admit you were wrong. Because they don't have to have any faith when the person who's praying is moving in the gift of faith. The other person doesn't need any. They're healed on your faith. So the other thing is that if they got partial healing, tell them to thank God for it and ask for more. Not like the woman I told you had the ALS, and she couldn't lift her hands past her waist. By the time we were in, she had them way up over her head, did her hair the next morning. But I had something to tell her because she had a 45-minute drive and they were shutting the building down and we couldn't stay anymore. Here's what I told her, what I call post-prayer recommendation. I said, the Spirit of God's still on you because you're still hot. You're still feeling that heat. You're still feeling that energy. Do not take your focus off of what you're feeling right now. This continue all your way home. I knew she had a 45-minute drive to their hotel. Her friend was doing driver. Stay focused on God. Thank him for what he's doing, and don't go talking about something else. Stay focused on this healing right now. You're in the presence of God and he's healing you. She did that. She ended up getting laughter on the way home, speaking in tongues for the first time in her life, weeping. The heat stayed on the whole 45 minutes. She was better even when she got to the hotel than she was. She left the church building, and she went to sleep, she told me, with that anointing still on her, and woke up in the peace of God and was doing, like squats the next morning. She had so much energy. And so that was what I call post-prayer suggestion. So tell them what they need. If, for example, let's say it's a lifestyle. You say you may not want to do that anymore. Let's say that, whatever would encourage them, comfort them, and instruct them. That's the kind of things you want to say rather than condemn them. So that's a 5-step prayer. It's really relational. It's like this. I can't heal, but Jesus can. And if I pray for 5 people, nothing happens. I saw what Randy Clark can do. And then I pray for the next one, they get healed. I saw what Jesus can do. And that's what keeps you humble. People say, how do you stay humble? I say, I pray for a lot of people, which means I do see lots of people get healed, but I see more that don't get healed. And I don't understand it. I'm just trying to be faithful with what I do know. Not everybody I tell about Jesus accepts him either.
Yes. So Randy, my wife asked a loaded question there, but it was good.
It was good.
Yeah, it was very good. And man, we could do this for a long time, but I think we are past our time. Yeah, see how fast time goes.
Yeah, time goes by fast.
And I truly enjoyed it. And I know you're a very, very busy person. And maybe in the future we'll get back together. And I definitely I think I sent my address for your book, because that we were having a discussion at harvest time about the intimacy with God. I'm going to enjoy reading that. And
yeah, I'll show it to you. What it looks like. You can get it on Amazon, and I'll send it to you. But I mean, for people that's watching, Intimacy with God. And Kathy Lee Gifford wrote the foreword for me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Intimacy with God. Make sure you get that. That's awesome right there. And well, we've come to a close, and Randy, I want to say thank you. And I'm gonna shoot you something that's good. I got an idea in one of these spheres to deal with some athletes, entertainers about the supernatural lifestyle.
Yeah, that'd be great. Lowe's, I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Tell your wife I said hello.
I will.
All right. God bless.
And tell your wife that if she wants to come for the doctorate program, we'd love to have her.
I'm coming.
She said.
All right.
So again, thank you everyone for your support tonight. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I love you, and have a blessed weekend.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Lowe's More, the Blueprint Podcast. Stay connected and follow us at our website, www.lowesmore.com. That's LOWESMOORE.com. You can also join the discussion on Twitter at Lowe's More and on Facebook at Lowe's More Jr. As always, thank you for pushing your mindset towards a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast to stay fully up to date with everything we're up to. Until next time, be kind to yourself and each other.
With the eating is a joke, I ain't buying it like I'm broke. Insufficient funds for insignificant.